Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Well, we're going to talk about a subject that, not everybody knows about or understands, and it's autism. It's all those things like cerebral palsy, and there are very important ways that you can help, but most people don't know and they don't even read about it. But that's why we're so happy to have Michele Reillo on, and Dr. Reillo is with the Neubauer Hyperbaric Neurologic Center. So thank you for being with us today.
No, thank you for inviting me.
So let's talk a little bit about autism, and because that's something that, unless you have a child or you have someone you know with that, you really don't understand it, do you?
No, you don't, because autism all of a sudden seems to become a regressive type of phenomenon, and the child very slowly seems to withdraw from connection and the ability to relate with family, and speech becomes very difficult, and it's as if you're losing your child to a remote island. And parts of the brain that are affected, the amygdala, it's a little tiny nut-like part of your brain, connects to your ability to reason, communicate, and how you perceive a life. And we know, Dr. Neubauer, many, many years ago, started working with children with autism, with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And we know that by reoxygenating these parts of the brain, that you can restore and reverse these types of patterns that begin to occur with autism. And it's very, very exciting and encouraging because, we know now that the parts of the brain that are affected can be related to a wide variety of things. It could have happened from heredity, genetics. It can be just idiopathic, meaning we have no reason, or from brain injury. But there is hope, and indeed a child can be restored, and it's very, very exciting for us. So
yeah, it should be. And I did have a question. I don't know if I've ever asked this of you because we've done a lot of shows. Can anyone ever be harmed getting too much oxygen in hyperbaric oxygen?
No, we don't treat people at pressures that are harmful. So we treat at 1.5 ATA, which means that it's about the equivalent of 9 feet of seawater in marine terms. It's a very, very low pressure. So there is virtually zero risk of any harm. When we talk about the treatment at greater depths for, decompression sickness and people who have, really severe injuries, then we have to watch the number of treatments we get in succession. But the risk of having any episode at all, any problems, is virtually, less than 5% of any of the population in all years of doing hyperbaric therapy. The greatest injury that you have is people become anxious within the chamber, and we have a way to, calm your nerves, and that means you can watch television. We're in constant communication with you. So it is one of the safest modalities that we have. People are more anxious in MRI machines than they are in hyperbaric chambers, by the way.
Well, that's interesting you should mention that, because in this show, The Good Doctor, the young man who is the good doctor who has autism was treating a young boy who had autism. And the biggest problem was they had to go and do an MRI, and that was too hard for that little kid.
Right.
So
right. Because you feel closed in an MRI. You can't look out. Your head is isolated. You have no contact with anyone. Where the hyperbaric chamber, it's clear acrylic, and you can look out, and you're looking at the physician, or the nurse, or the technician who's right there with you, and so that minimizes your fear because you're not by yourself.
Exactly, and you can really do children. I mean, are they all one size, the chamber?
The ones that we have at the center are quite large. There are for individuals, as opposed to something called a multi-place chamber, where I was trained, and those can be 23 people, and they sit in lounge chairs and get oxygen through hoods. So it depends on the facility. Yeah, they're quite remarkable. And large hospital centers, trauma centers, have huge hyperbaric chambers that are built into the institution. And that's where I was trained at the University of Maryland. And there's multiple lounge chairs and 3 different locks, and it's almost like being in an airline. Where the chambers at the Neubauer Center are designed for individuals, and so it's much more personable. And you lie down in the chamber and breathe oxygen. There's no hood over your head. You can watch television. Children are very comfortable in the chamber, so it really reduces their anxiety.
So let's move off of autism for a minute and go to cerebral palsy. What have you seen that has happened with children or people with that?
Yeah, the cerebral palsy. We're having an increase in issues with birth. It was actually on the phone on the television today. We were talking about incidences of difficulties with childbirth, and one of the issues with childbirth that can happen is a lack of oxygen to the brain, and that's what happens with cerebral palsy. And as a result, there's changes in motor coordination or communication or, gait, all types of cognitive and mobility issues that can happen. And from an incident during delivery or pre-delivery that minimizes oxygen to certain parts of the brain. We know that we can use hyperbaric to restore that. And over the years, I personally had, in my center, we had children with their hands that were completely closed. They're unable to be opened. And we used hyperbaric, a series of treatments, and the children were able to regain the use of their hands, open their hands again. We used it as adjunctive therapy with physical therapy, so that children can regain their mobility, their ability to walk. It's very, very exciting. And again, it's a time commitment, but once it's done, it's reversed. And that's why we're so thrilled about using hyperbaric with these types of brain injuries, because this is not something that regresses. Once it's done, it's done. So it comes, stay with us for a little while, receive treatment, use physical therapy as a part of regaining, function back, and then move on. And that's what's encouraging about hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It's not easy as taking a pill, but there is no pill that will restore brain function. That has to be done with a hyperbaric chamber.
And so you, of course, were trained up in Maryland, and Dr. Neubauer was one of our leading proponents of this in the country, maybe in the world. Why hasn't it become the most useful? Why hasn't it been on all the doctors' brains to use this?
I think part of the reluctance is really governed by the insurance companies. The insurance companies, again, will pay for certain indications. Wound care predominantly is one of them, and decompression sickness. But for the neurologic components, that's just, again, becoming, regaining attention. And ironically, that's because of the brain injury from football players. And
right.
As I had mentioned, that before in a previous taping, we discussed brain injury, and we know that hyperbaric reverses brain injury and stops CTE. And so the same type of damage that's being done to the brain, whether it's cerebral palsy and autism, near drowning, it makes absolutely no difference. Remember, there's been interruptions in oxygen levels. We have to pressurize the patient and give them oxygen to restore those cells. And that there's only one modality that enables us to do that. Unfortunately, the reluctance of our country to embrace hyperbaric oxygen therapy as it should is really governed by insurance companies. And that's really the bottom line. So we have to, some are more open than others for payment. But again, we have to take it on a case-by-case basis now.
All right. So let's just say that there's a pediatrician who's working with the family, and the family can pay out of pocket. Will that physician recommend it at least?
I think the majority of pediatricians who are dealing with brain injured children are open to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I think that there's been enough PR, again, surrounding brain injury and football players and concussion, that there is a heightened awareness that something can be done. So I think that is the case. And again, if your pediatrician is not open, find one who is, because there are plenty of them out there who routinely use hyperbaric as part of their practice. And I think that for anyone, whether it's a grandparent or a parent of a child who has a brain injury or an adult with a brain injury, again, find a practitioner. You're the consumer. Find a practitioner who will help you improve quality of life, because that's the whole game plan. I mean, how horrible is it to go through life not being able to open your hands when with, 20 treatments of hyperbaric, we can restore your ability to, open your hands, whether you've had a stroke or you've had cerebral palsy. And that's what's so exciting about this, is that we can actually do that. And it's very commonplace. So find a practitioner who will support you.
Just let me tell everybody again, my guest is Dr. Reillo, and she is with the Neubauer Hyperbaric Neurologic Center. It is a fabulous place. I have been there. I have known Dr. Neubauer, who started this. I know the great work that they do. They have, from people who've been electrocuted from a thunderstorm. There have been so many instances, or I think there was a Florida Power and Light man that was electrocuted from, touching the wrong thing, and they get a certain amount of treatments and they come back. So it's all been on record, and so I'm really addressing this to you out there who's listening. And if you have something that people have given up on, as a matter of fact, even last month's article was hyperbaric oxygen for therapy for radiation for cancer, and radiation therapy for cancer. I mean, there's a way to use this with other treatments. And so I hope that you will take a tour. Just call them. I'm going to give you their phone number. Call them. Go down for a tour. At least know something. You never know. It could be a family member whom you just love, and you can see that they're not going to make it unless something unusual happens. So the phone number that you're going to call them is, remember, this is Pencil Talk Radio. Get your pencils out. 954-771-4000. Again, 954-771-4000. Or go on the web. It's oceanhbo.com. oceanhbo.com. They are down there, a beautiful area called Lauderdale-By-The-Sea. It's right on, I guess that's, let's see, what is that street that it's on? It's the ocean. So what is it? A1A, I think. It's A1A, right? On North Ocean Drive, right. It's 4001 North Ocean Drive in Lauderdale-By-The-Sea. And they have a lot of staff there that you can talk with. Dr. Reillo is not there all the time, but you can certainly make an appointment with her to talk with her. She's quite a brilliant woman, and we are so happy that we can cover something like this in our magazine. Dr. Reillo, I don't remember, have you been to our Cure Symposium?
No, I haven't, but I was hoping for an invitation.
Yes, I hope we will be able to do that, because it's going to be happening in March. And we're looking forward to that, because that's what we try to do. Talk to people about issues and items that they don't know about that are cutting edge, and you certainly have brought that to us. So let's just run down this. Now, let's say there is a child or a person who has autism, and they go and they have these treatments. Do you see a progression, like after 5 treatments, after 10? I mean, do you start to see a difference?
Yes, generally patients improve. You see a sudden improvement, and then you'll reach a plateau, and then we generally only give 20 treatments at a time, and then you take a break, and then we do it again. Take a week off, and then we do it again. And the issue is that with the thresholds of oxygen, people suddenly acclimate to their environment differently. So what you perceive initially as communication, as interaction, etc., then becomes integrated in how people normally respond in their world, and all of a sudden you realize that the individual is more communicative, is more aware of what's going on, more interactive. And so the answer to the question is it's a progressive improvement, but the people around you, family and friends, also realize that there's a dramatic improvement in interaction, and that's something that is observed. So the functionality is all related to, how we interact with our environment, and that improves dramatically with hyperbaric, with autism and brain injury, because that stimulus and how we receive that stimulus and how we respond to it improves with reoxygenation of the brain.
Well, tell me how, if someone has cancer, how this can affect them.
Well, we use hyperbaric oxygen therapy with radiation as an indication. And so if you've had after radiation treatments, for example, we can use hyperbaric. With certain chemotherapy treatments, we can use it simultaneously to minimize the side effects. And so, for example, if you've had radiation to a tumor and completed the radiation, but noticed you've had, severe fatigue or burned skin, et cetera, all of that is actually paid for by Medicare and insurance companies for post-radiation. And hyperbaric will restore those damaged cells, and that's what we're looking for. And it restores your immune system, reoxygenates the vessels that are damaged to the area, and, of course, any skin that's been damaged as well.
It is really amazing. And so it's been around for a long, long time, hasn't it? I mean, the first time we even saw this was, I guess, when there was that movie when the divers went down and they went too deep.
Right, decompression sickness.
Yeah, right. I forget what that movie was, but I remember the sponges. Do you remember the name of that movie? I mean, that's the first time that it wasn't in the way that you do it, though, but it was, they didn't go into a chamber. Didn't they have, what did they do? I forget.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember the name of the film, but I know that, over the past several hundred years, there's been decompression chambers for divers, and the medical use has been, since the turn of the 20th century, we've progressively implemented hyperbaric chambers for recovery, and over the past 50 years, hyperbaric has been used routinely for neurologic conditions, and so the level of awareness is really hindered by I don't think people realize that how much knowledge we have is hindered by our insurance companies.
Oh, yeah.
And if they don't pay for it, people then stop searching for answers. And that's been a problem. Now more insurers are more open to payment because by not paying for it, then you're denying people, an improvement in quality of life. That's number one. Number two, they realize that it's more cost effective for people to be well and return to work than it is to be disabled. So there are a couple trends now that are changing insurers' ideas. And of course, we again, I can't stress enough with the issues around concussion and how immobilizing brain injury is. people are looking dramatically for answers. They're looking for answers. One split second, your brain is affected by a traumatic injury or an accident during childbirth. In 1 second, your entire personality and your ability to function changes. And all of that can be restored and improved with hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
I was thinking about a friend I had who has passed away, but she had ALS, and I just wonder if that would ever have helped her.
In the beginning, it may have slowed the progression. ALS causes such severe damage to the nerves in the brain and then the respiratory system, and that it becomes, hyperbaric can only help, slow the progression, but it doesn't help the end point, unfortunately.
So that's at least, you know that. So you're not going to go in there with hopeful, ideas, but at least you know the things that you've seen and that have worked. When you get small children and they have had a near drowning experience, I know Dr. Neubauer worked on that a lot, and I would see these, these little kids. And have you seen them come back? Yes,
it's amazing. Children who've been in full arrest for over 10 minutes, being able to restore their brains so that they can function. Children who are catatonic or in coma. And, he worked for years on being able to restore their brain function so that he could, again, come out of that catatonic comatose state. And yes, and I've personally witnessed that, and I've experienced that at his center. Dr. Neubauer was essential in my training, and, he received so much negativity. People were so opposed to his work, and now all these years later, indeed, he was right, and there is no other way to restore the brain.
That's right. So
this is it.
So the kids, without this, they're just in a comatose state.
They become, in a comatose or semi-comatose state, having survived cardiac arrest. Once you have, it's called an anoxic episode to the brain, that level of awareness, is very fluctuates and is very transient. But, they're unable to move, speak, care for themselves, interact, and then being able to reactionate the brain. All of a sudden, people regain consciousness. And then from that point on, you have to use adjunctive physical therapy to regain the use of your arms and legs, which haven't been used for a while if you've been in a coma. So it's very, very exciting. It happens over and over and over again. So it's obviously not a phenomenon. It's a effective modality.
So when you see parents who are bearing this terrible situation with their child, you would think that whatever it took, they would find the money and they would do it. And you also wonder why insurance doesn't pay for it, because I would think that, besides the humanity part of it, that they would have a healthier person because they're probably insuring them for other things that are caused by this. So it's, and then of course I was thinking about the older folks that we were talking about, stroke and things that happen to people over 50. And Medicare is so foolish not to include this. They include so much, and I don't know who's responsible for that. It must be years ago, and so it's so silly if there's something that's real. if they approve it for wound care, that something's going on. You would think that they would approve it for other kinds of illnesses.
You would think that, yes, that would. And again, it's most unfortunate that it falls back to the family and to the patient to find hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but it is well worth the effort, and there are more humanitarian movements to helping people. There are foundations set up for brain injury, places you can apply for funding to help pay for the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And, of course, being very aggressive with the insurer is also absolutely imperative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe in our lifetime we'll see Medicare jump up and do some more things. And what they need is a very progressive director of the whole system. And then maybe they would this is the new wave. The new wave is everyone wants to live better and longer. And now that they found out what happened with the brain from people returning from the wars and the sports, so obvious.
Right. Yes. We know that for Mr. Hernandez, for example, who unfortunately committed suicide in prison, had profound CTE. And, he had one of the most severe cases I've seen in a young man, resulting from football injury. And, he had a history of violent murders and behavior patterns that were completely, aberrant. And all of this is from brain trauma. Now, if that can happen from repetitive head injury from sports, you can possibly imagine, what other types of behaviors we're looking at when people have had brain injuries. So we just allow them the luxury of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. All that can be stopped. So it obviously worked for Joe Namath. I mean, he went through multiple treatments of hyperbaric. He is one of our biggest advocates for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Many football players now have routinely used hyperbaric as part of their recovery period. So it's very encouraging that we have people who are aware that this is how we need to restore the injured brain.
And by your coming on our radio show and putting your articles in Boomer Times, I know we're making a difference. And I must thank you so much for doing this. And I just want to be able to have everybody get in touch with you all down there. And so we're going to do that by what I want to do is give the website. Well, first we'll give the phone number. It's 954-771-4000. Just go there for a tour. Just go there because you heard the show. And then get on the website and go to oceanhbo.com. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your coming on. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.